The sun had not yet burned the morning haze from the valley when the first sound of Dry Creek stirred, a church bell, slow and steady, rolling over the rooftops like a hymn made of dust. The town sat small against the edge of the desert, a clutch of timber houses leaning toward the one crooked street that ran through its heart. Heat already shimmered off the dirt road, even in the early light. The blacksmith's forge hissed somewhere near the well, hammer meeting anvil in rhythm with the bell. Children ran barefoot between the houses, laughter echoing through the stillness. For a little while, it was the sound of life, honest, ordinary, unguarded. Dry Creek was a place that asked for little and gave even less. Its people had come from everywhere, farmers driven from flooded plains, soldiers turned ranch hands, widows who still wore black though their grief had grown old. They had settled under the tall cottonwoods and built something fragile but real, a town where no man's shadow stretched longer than his neighbor's. The preacher, old Reverend Silas, stood outside the chapel wiping dust from the whitewashed cross above the door. "Ain't much in this world," he often said, "but peace is enough if a man knows how to keep it." Across the way, the blacksmith, Jonah Pike, dipped his iron in the trough, steam rising like a ghost. The widow, Mary Cole, stepped out of her husband's small general store, her hands red with flour from kneading bread. Her boy, Daniel, no older than 8, chased a paper windmill through the street. She smiled at the sight, though her eyes carried the weariness of long miles and empty years. By noon, the air was dry as gunpowder. The wind came crawling from the east, carrying with it a strange silence. Birds left the rooftops. Dogs slipped under porches. Even the bell rope swayed without sound. Then came the tremor, soft at first, like distant thunder. The blacksmith straightened, his hammer frozen midair. Mary turned toward the horizon, hand shading her eyes. A dark line was cutting through the heat. Riders, maybe a dozen or more, their dust rising high behind them. "They're coming fast," Jonah muttered, his voice tight. When the riders broke through the glare, Dry Creek saw the red scarves first, the mark of the Red Vultures gang, men known across 3 counties for burning what they couldn't steal. At their head rode Clint Riker, a broad man with a scar splitting his cheek from ear to jaw. He grinned as he came, teeth white against the red dust. His coat was black, long enough to hide the twin revolvers at his hips. His horse foamed at the mouth from the run, but Riker didn't slow. The preacher's bell began to toll again, this time frantic, warning. Mothers pulled children inside. Men fumbled for rifles long and used. Sheriff Tom Avery stepped out of his office, shotgun across his arm, sweat darkening his collar. "Afternoon, Sheriff," Riker called as he reined up in the middle of town. His men spread out behind him like wolves circling a herd. "Heard this is a quiet place. We don't like quiet. Quiet makes a man feel unwelcome." Avery stood his ground. "You're not welcome, Riker. Ride on." Riker's grin widened. "That's so." He turned his horse in a slow circle, looking over the townsfolk gathering near their doors. "You hear that, boys? Sheriff says we ain't welcome. Guess we better make ourselves at home then." The first shot came without warning. One of Riker's men fired into the sky, and Dry Creek's peace shattered like glass. The horses reared, women screamed, and gunfire followed, wild, echoing through the narrow street. Avery fired once, hitting a man in the leg before a bullet caught him in the chest. He fell face first into the dust, his badge glinting in the sun. Jonah Pike ran toward the well, trying to grab his hammer, but 2 outlaws cut him off. They beat him until his hands were useless and left him groaning beside his forge. The preacher shouted for calm, holding his cross high, but Riker's laughter drowned him out. Mary Cole pulled Daniel inside the store and bolted the door. Through a crack in the boards, she saw them kick in windows, drag sacks of flour into the street, tear open barrels of whiskey. The smell of liquor mixed with the smell of smoke. Riker dismounted, walked up the steps of the saloon, and fired his gun into the ceiling. "Listen up," he bellowed. "This here's our town now. You do what we say, you live. You don't." He pointed his revolver at the nearest window and fired again. The glass exploded outward. "You die quicker than your sheriff did." The Red Vultures hooped and hollered, their voices filling every corner of Dry Creek. Horses stamped through gardens, Boots crashed through doors. Somewhere down the street, a woman cried out as her husband was dragged away for daring to speak. Inside the store, Mary pressed her boy close. Daniel's small body trembled against her. "Mama, what's happening?" he whispered. She hushed him, her own heart pounding. "Don't make a sound, baby. Don't even breathe loud." Outside, the preacher knelt beside Sheriff Avery's body. "Merciful Lord," he prayed, "deliver us from evil." His voice was shaking. "Deliver this town." But even he knew the Lord might be listening from too far away. By sundown, Dry Creek was unrecognizable. Smoke rose from the blacksmith's roof, where they'd set fire to the workshop. The saloon spilled with drunken laughter and broken glass. The Red Vultures had taken what they wanted: money, horses, food, and now took their ease watching the town crawl under them. Clint Riker stood on the balcony of the saloon, bottle in hand, surveying his new kingdom. "Ain't it something?" he drawled. "A whole town brought to heel before supper. Maybe I'll call it Riker's Creek now." No one answered him. The townsfolk stayed hidden, the air heavy with their silence. Somewhere, a dog barked once and was quieted by a gunshot. Mary waited until night fell. She crept out to fetch water for her son, keeping to the shadows behind the store. In the street, she saw Reverend Silas moving slow toward the chapel, lantern in hand. His white hair glowed against the darkness. She wanted to stop him, to tell him to hide, but he only gave her a small nod, the kind of nod that said he knew his time and his duty. When he reached the chapel steps, he rang the bell again. Its sound was thin now, weak, like a dying heart. Riker looked up from the saloon porch, scowling. That old fool's got nerve. He lifted his revolver and fired once. The bell stopped mid-ring. The old man staggered, dropping his lantern. The flame rolled down the steps, catching on the dry wood. The chapel began to burn. Mary turned away, holding back a sob. She hurried inside and barred the door again, clutching her boy to her chest as the orange glow flickered through the cracks. "Don't look, Daniel," she whispered. "Don't ever look." Through the night, the sound of boots, laughter, and breaking glass echoed through Dry Creek. The people hid and prayed, each one wondering who would come for them when morning broke. Some thought of fleeing into the desert, but the gang had men posted at every end of town. The bell tower burned until the roof collapsed, sending sparks into the sky like dying stars. When dawn came, the smoke hung low and gray. The gang slept where they'd fallen, on porches, in the street, beside whiskey barrels. The town lay beaten, too afraid to move. The first light of dawn crept over Dry Creek like a tired breath, washing the ruins of the night in pale gold. Smoke still curled from the charred chapel. Doors hung off their hinges. The dust in the street looked blood-tinted in the slanted light. From the east came a sound few noticed at first, a slow, uneven rhythm of hoofbeats, steady as a heartbeat that had outlived too much. He rode out of the sunrise, one man and one horse. His coat, once black, was now the color of old storms, frayed, torn at the hem, heavy with road dust. His hat brim cast a shadow that swallowed his face, save for the scar cutting from his temple to his jaw. The horse limped on one leg, ribs showing through the hide, but it kept moving, loyal to a man who asked little more than that. On the saddle horn hung a single holster, an aged revolver, oiled, spotless, cared for like scripture. He stopped at the edge of town, where the burned church leaned like a dying prayer. The rider dismounted and stood a long time without speaking, eyes moving over the stillness, bodies buried in the sand, smoke twisting above the rooftops, the faint shape of people hiding behind shutters. His name, though none here knew it yet, was Elias Kane. The old preacher, bent and hollow-eyed, saw him first. "Mister," he called softly, voice shaking from smoke and age, "you best keep riding. Ain't nothing left here but ruin." Elias turned his gaze toward him. "Who did this?" "Red Vultures," the preacher said, coughing. "Clint Riker's lot. Took what they wanted. Left the rest for the buzzards. You can't help us, son. They own this town now." Elias studied the burned bell tower, the ashes at his boots. Nobody owns anything forever. The preacher watched him lead his horse toward the well, the way he moved, unhurried, quiet, like a man who'd already weighed death and found it light. By midday the villagers began to stir from their hiding places. Faces pale, eyes darting. They saw the stranger watering his horse, repairing a broken leather strap with patient hands. Whispers followed him through the street. "Drifter," someone said. "Gun for hire," said another. A woman crossing the road muttered. Could be one of them ghosts from the border wars. Men who never came back right. Children peeked from behind barrels, drawn to him the way small creatures stare at fire. Elias said nothing, only nodded to those who dared meet his eyes. When a wagon wheel snapped under an old man's cart, Elias stepped forward, lifted the broken axle with callous strength, and set it right without a word. The man thanked him. Elias only tipped his hat and walked on. Near the saloon, a young brute from Riker's gang, one of those left behind to watch the town, grabbed a boy by the collar for kicking dust near his horse. The man raised his hand to strike. The sound that stopped him wasn't a shout, but the quiet click of metal. Elias stood behind him, revolver drawn, calm as a winter morning. "Let him go," Elias said. The outlaw sneered. "You his daddy? Let him go," Elias repeated, voice flat as a stone. Something in that tone, in the stillness of his hand, made the man hesitate. He released the boy, spitting in the dust. "You best ride on, stranger. Riker don't like company." Elias holstered his gun and turned away. "Neither do I." The story spread before sundown. By nightfall everyone in Dry Creek knew the stranger had faced one of Riker's men and lived. Some called it courage, others called it madness. But a flicker of something passed through the town that had been missing since the invasion. Hope, though no one dared name it. Mary Cole found him behind the burned chapel, tending to his horse under the dim orange sky. Her dress was worn, her eyes rimmed red from smoke and fear. She approached slowly, hands folded to hide their tremble. "You don't look like the kind that comes to save anyone," she said quietly. He didn't look up. "I ain't." "Then why are you here?" Elias pulled the saddle blanket straight and finally met her gaze. "Because they took from me once too." Mary frowned. "You mean Riker?" "No," he said. "Men like him." He turned toward the dying light, the wind catching the edge of his coat. "They're all the same. Different names, same hands." For a moment she said nothing. The world had gone silent around them, the air heavy, the faint ringing of distant metal from the blacksmith's ruined forge. She wanted to ask more, but saw something in his eyes that warned her off. A grief too old to touch. When darkness settled, Elias moved like a shadow through Dry Creek. He studied every alley, every corner where Riker's men had left their mark. He counted their horses, marked where they slept, noted the sound of their laughter spilling from the saloon. He memorized faces by lantern light, each one filed away with quiet purpose. He spent the night beyond town, near the dry riverbed where the mesquite trees grew crooked against the wind. He built no fire until the moon rose high. Then he lit a small one, enough to warm his hands, the flames reflecting in his eyes. From his saddlebag he drew a folded piece of leather. Inside lay a faded photograph, his wife and a little girl, smiling stiffly beside a cabin somewhere lost to memory. He stared at it a long time, the fire crackling soft. The silence of the desert wrapped around him, vast and empty. He remembered the night they were taken, raiders, drunk and laughing, torches in the dark. He'd been gone chasing a bounty north of the border. Came back to ashes and bone. Every step since had been a long road back toward something he couldn't name. A justice that never came cheap. A coyote called from the hills. The wind shifted, bringing with it the faint scent of smoke from Dry Creek. He rubbed a thumb over the edge of the photograph, then tucked it away carefully, like a relic. From his coat pocket, he pulled a small notebook, worn thin. Inside, pages filled with names, some crossed out, others still waiting. At the bottom of the newest page, he wrote Clint Riker in steady, deliberate strokes. The fire popped, sending sparks into the night. He leaned forward, face half lit, voice low as if speaking to the ghosts in the flames. Time to collect. The desert wind carried the words away, but the meaning stayed, hanging in the cold air. Somewhere beyond the hills, a lone wolf howled. In Dry Creek, men slept drunk under stolen roofs. never knowing the storm already gathering at their door. Morning came slow, heavy with smoke and silence. The sun rose behind the ridge, staining the sky the color of old blood. For the first time in days, the street of Dry Creek lay still. No laughter, no threats, only the whisper of the wind brushing over the gallows they'd built beside the saloon. Then a scream tore the quiet. One of Riker's men stumbled out of the saloon, pale as chalk, pointing toward the dust. There, half buried in shadow, lay the body of a red vulture. The man's eyes were open, staring at nothing, a single hole dead center between them, clean, perfect, like judgment made by a steady hand. Panic rippled through the gang. They dragged the corpse inside, cursing, shouting over each other. Who did it? Where was he hit? Who's out there? Nobody had seen a thing. Elias had moved through the night, like a ghost that never breathed. No boot prints, no sound but the creak of his revolver belt when he drew and fired. One bullet, one less evil walking. By mid-morning, the Red Vultures split into groups, storming through alleys, yanking townsfolk from their homes, demanding names. But the people said nothing. They'd seen the shape in the night, the glint of a coat, the measured gait, the whisper of boots that moved with purpose. Fear and hope mingled in their eyes. For the first time since the gang came, hope was stronger. Elias stayed invisible, watching from rooftops, from the cover of the chapel's scorched remains. He moved with patience, not haste. His face betrayed nothing but focus, his eyes cold, detached. Yet beneath that silence burned something human, a rage that remembered every scream he'd ever heard, every loss he'd carried. That evening, when the gang returned to the saloon, they found their whiskey stores outside, every barrel split open, every drop soaking into the dirt. The smell of liquor filled the town, thick and sour. A few men rushed for their horses, only to find the corral empty. Every horse cut loose into the desert night. Find him, Riker roared, slamming his fist against the bar. He ain't no ghost. He bleed same as us. But even Riker felt it, the weight of eyes watching from somewhere unseen. Elias wasn't far. He had taken to the outskirts, where the dunes swallowed light. He counted bullets, cleaned the barrel of his revolver with a torn piece of cloth, and loaded each round with ritual precision. His coat brushed the sand as he knelt, whispering low prayers meant for no god that would listen. When the church bell rang again that night, one hollow, broken toll, he knew it was Mary. He crossed the street unseen, keeping to the shadows cast by firelight. She waited by the back of the store, clutching a small bundle wrapped in canvas. Her hands trembled when she offered it to him. "Ammunition," she said softly, "and a little bread. That's all I could hide." He nodded once, tucking it beneath his coat. "You shouldn't risk it." "They're drunk again," she whispered. "But come morning, Riker says he's hanging 3 men unless someone speaks your name." Elias's eyes met hers, gray and distant, yet alive with something fierce. "He won't live to see morning." She stared at him, searching for mercy, finding none. "You can't take them all alone." "I don't need to," he said. "I just need them to know they ain't untouchable." Then he was gone, swallowed by the dark, leaving her heart racing in the cold. The moon climbed high, pale and merciless. Near the ruins of the chapel, 3 gunmen stood guard, rifles in hand, their breath fogging in the chill. They talked in low voices about leaving town, about the curse that had come for them. One laughed nervously, saying maybe they'd killed a ghost's kin. The laughter died when the first bullet found his chest. The second man turned, shouting into the dark, firing blind. The echo rolled through the street like thunder. Then silence. His partner's body dropped beside him before he finished reloading. Elias stepped out from behind the broken fence, face calm, revolver raised. Moonlight glinted off the steel. The third man froze, eyes wide, gun shaking in his hand. You can't kill us all," the outlaw stammered. Elias's reply came quiet as dust. "Watch me." 3 shots later, only the wind moved. The bell swung on its beam, creaking without sound. From the windows, faces watched, the blacksmith, the preacher, Mary with her boy hidden behind her skirt. They saw not just vengeance, but precision. A man who moved like he'd done this before, 100 times over. each kill an echo of the last. By dawn, word spread that 3 Red Vultures had fallen, and none knew how. The legend grew faster than the light. Some swore he walked through bullets. Others whispered he'd sold his soul for revenge. Inside the saloon, Riker slammed his whiskey bottle against the wall, glass spraying across the floor. "No man does this alone," he shouted. "I want him found before sunrise. Hang him from my goddamn balcony." He sent his best men scouring the outskirts, 6 riders with torches cutting through the black. But the only thing they found was the echo of hooves and the smell of burnt whiskey. Near midnight, the town held its breath again. Elias crouched on the roof of the sheriff's old office, coat whipping in the wind. He watched Riker pace below, drunk on fury, barking orders into the empty street. "Come on out, Ghost," Riker yelled. "If you want my blood so bad, take it." No answer, only the creak of a shutter. He spat into the dirt. "Coward." From the shadows near the saloon porch, something fluttered. Riker turned, squinting. There, nailed to the door by the handle of a knife, was a piece of torn paper. He ripped it free, unfolding it under the lantern light. The handwriting was rough, deliberate. "You took this town. Now I'm taking it back." Riker stared at the words, jaw tightening, knuckles white around the paper. Around him, his men shifted nervously, eyes darting toward the rooftops. Somewhere out in the dark, a lone rifle cocked. The next second, the saloon's lantern shattered, plunging the street into black. And in that silence, a single thought settled into every heart in Dry Creek. Justice had returned, wearing the face of a ghost. Dawn came gray and restless, the kind of morning when the wind itself seemed to carry warning. Dust swirled through the empty streets of Dry Creek, whispering across broken windows and bloodstained boards. The bell at the chapel hung crooked, swaying with each gust like a noose waiting for its neck. Elias Kane stood in the middle of the street, his long coat rippling behind him. His revolver rested easy in his hand, its metal dulled by age, but steady as his breath. Across from him, shadows shifted, men with rifles, half drunk, half mad with fear. The Red Vultures had surrounded him, 30 against 1, and still he didn't move. He might have been carved from the same dust the town was built on. Clint Riker rode forward through the line of his men, black horse snorting steam in the cold. His scar caught the weak light, a jagged white streak across a face that had forgotten what mercy looked like. "You sure picked the wrong town to die in," he said, voice rough with whiskey and hate. Elias didn't answer. He holstered his revolver slowly, eyes fixed on the man before him. Riker grinned. "I don't know what you are, stranger, a ghost, a fool, or the devil himself. But I'll give you this. You've got sand." He lifted his hand. "Kill him." Gunfire ripped the silence. The world became thunder and smoke. Elias moved with deadly calm, faster than thought, his revolver a flash of light in the haze. One shot, then another, then another. Each man who raised his weapon fell where he stood, clean, perfect, final. The sound rolled down the street, like a storm breaking. Horses screamed, men stumbled back, firing blind into the dust. Elias stepped sideways, eyes sharp, his every move deliberate, precise. Bullets hissed past his coat, tearing the fabric, grazing his arm. He barely flinched. When the smoke cleared, half the gang lay still. The rest fled toward the saloon, tripping over their dead. Elias reloaded, each click echoing like a hammer striking a coffin lid. Riker's voice cut through the chaos. "Hold your ground, damn you. He bleeds. He ain't no ghost." But his men no longer believed him. The fear had settled too deep. Elias walked forward, boots grinding glass, the revolver's barrel smoking faintly in the morning air. "You should have stayed dead." Riker spat. "You and your kind were supposed to be gone." Elias's eyes narrowed. "You remember me." The color drained from Riker's face. "I know that voice." The wind carried the smell of gunpowder and burning. Elias stopped a few paces away, the brim of his hat shadowing his eyes. "You should," he said quietly. "Last time we met, I put your brother on a train to Yuma. He didn't make it." Riker's jaw clenched, disbelief twisting into rage. You were that marshal, Elias Kane. They said you were dead." "I was," Elias said. Until now. Riker's laugh cracked like broken glass. Then this is justice, huh? You killed my kin, and now I kill you. No, Elias said, his voice low, steady. This is balance. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then both men moved. Riker drew first, his revolver flashing silver. Elias's gun cleared leather half a breath later. 2 shots thundered at once. The recoil slammed through the air. Riker staggered, hit low in the side, blood blooming through his coat. Elias took a bullet across the shoulder, spinning him back a step. Dust rose between them, like smoke from Hell's Gate. Riker dropped to one knee, clutching his wound, eyes burning. You think you've won? He gasped. You think killing me makes you clean? Elias wiped blood from his mouth. It don't make me clean. It just makes the world quieter. Riker lunged for his dropped gun, but Elias's final shot ended it, 1 bullet through the heart. The outlaw froze mid-breath, then crumpled into the dust that had waited for him since birth. For a long moment, there was only the wind. The few surviving Red Vultures lowered their weapons and backed away, eyes wide with something that wasn't just fear. It was recognition. The man before them wasn't a drifter or a ghost. He was Law, risen from his own grave to settle what time had left undone. They fled, leaving their leader's body behind. Elias swayed, the pain in his shoulder catching up at last. His revolver slipped from his fingers, landing softly beside his boot. He leaned against a post, breath shallow, eyes closing for a moment. From behind the ruined doors, the villagers began to emerge, one by one, cautious at first, then in growing waves. The blacksmith limped forward, hat in hand. The preacher clutched his Bible to his chest, eyes wet with disbelief. Children peeked from behind their mother's skirts, staring at the quiet man in the street who had done what no one dared. Mary Cole stepped into the light. Her dress was torn, face smudged with soot, but her gaze was steady. She walked to Elias, kneeling beside him. "You're hurt," she whispered. He managed a faint smile. "I've been worse." "You saved us," she said. "All of us." Elias shook his head. "No, I just reminded them they could be saved." She pressed a hand to his wound, tears sliding down her cheeks. "What will you do now?" He looked past her toward the horizon, where the desert shimmered gold and endless. "Ride," he said softly. "There's always another town. Always another Riker." He pushed himself up, slow and trembling, retrieving his revolver with care. The townsfolk gathered around him, their silence heavy with gratitude and awe. Reverend Silas lifted his hat. "You'll always have a place here, Marshal." Elias paused, meeting the old man's eyes. "It ain't my place anymore," he said. He turned to Mary, voice roughened by dust and pain. "Now it's your town again." He touched the brim of his hat, then mounted his weary horse. Blood stained the saddle, but he didn't seem to notice. As he rode down the main street, the people stepped aside, watching the man who had brought their world back from ruin. The wind picked up again, scattering dust in his wake, carrying whispers that would outlive them all. He didn't look back. The desert swallowed him whole, the horizon glowing with the last red of sunset. And in the years that followed, folks said justice rode through Dry Creek once, and never needed to again.